Hello everyone, welcome today for this EurOcean webinar. I'm Lolita Kushen and will be your moderator for this session. I'm currently an advocacy officer, spokesperson for Nausicaa, National Sea Center in France. And I'm passionate like you, I'm sure, about making ocean knowledge more accessible and inclusive for all. We are really pleased today to have you for the 9th edition of the EurOcean webinar series. And this session will be dedicated to exploring the role of ocean literacy in European Union business. So this event is organized by EurOcean, one of the founding members of EurOcean Coalition. And I will display a PowerPoint and do a really quick presentation of EurOcean Coalition before beginning to present our wonderful speakers and beginning the roundtable sessions. So, okay, I hope everyone is able to see my screen. Before we dive in our topic, EurOcean coalitions, which bring us here together, is really important to present. It's a bottom-up initiative funded by the European Commission since 2020. This coalition is a vibrant, inclusive community working to promote ocean literacy across Europe and make ocean sustainability a shared goal for all and everyone. So this coalition initiatives include 3 different communities, part of this coalition. Youth for Ocean, which supports young ocean advocates, EU Blue Schools, which engage educators, students, and the Youth for Ocean platform, which connects over 180 members for collective impact. So the coalition is becoming more and more an example of the most robust enabling mechanism for awareness and citizens' participation all around Europe. And it can offer different strengths for ocean literacy in Europe. Members can share experiences through meetings, workshops, and resources. The coalition also advocates for ocean literacy and European Union policy, supporting campaigns and high-level debates. It also helps translate ideas into actions with opportunities for partnerships, training, and support for young ocean advocates. So by partnering with IOC UNESCO and guided by an advisory board, EurOceans aligns with some key initiatives like the annual challenge of the year. And finally, members of the EurOcean coalitions gain visibility through events, awards, contributing to a united ocean literacy movement throughout Europe. So we really encourage you to be part of the movement if you're willing to. So don't hesitate to connect with EurOcean on LinkedIn, contact by email, and if you need any more details or whatever for helping us support ocean literacy efforts. You have everything here, the QR code and the emails. I'll let it on screen in a few minutes. Oop. Oop. So I hope this presentation was clear, and now I will briefly introduce our fantastic speakers that are on number 3 today. You also noticed that we have a Q&A channel that is open during this webinar. So please really feel free to start posting questions about the presentations, and we will address it at the end of the different presentation. So our first speaker is Guillermo de Lindon Guerra. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. So Guillermo holds a degree in political science and international relations and a master's in international development and public policy from Nova University, Lisbon. His research focuses on designing integrated policies for the ocean. Our second speaker is Sarah Stevenson-Jones. Sarah is a dedicated advocate for ocean literacy and the effective communication of complex scientific concepts to really diverse audiences. She has a strong foundation in teaching and STEAM education, and she co-created innovative ocean literacy activities for Europe projects like Climate Rest, and she will talk to us about that. She now works with the Society for Ecological Restoration, Europe, to support ecological restoration through strategic knowledge sharing and inclusive engagement. And finally, but not least, we will hear from Dylan Terry. Dylan is program director at AtchBlue, where he leads program to accelerate startups in aquaculture and blue carbon. He brings experience from both the investment world and entrepreneurship, having co-founded a startup studio focused on commercializing federally funded research. And Dylan works closely with scientists and founders to help turn innovation into impact, I guess. So we'll first have Guillermo to take the floor. Go on, feel free to take the floor. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed and put your question in the Q&A. Sarah, you go first and I will try to fix the mic of Guillermo. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Not a problem. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see it. All right. You can see my screen all right? Just give me a thumbs up. Yeah, great. Okay. So, hello. My name is Sarah Stevenson-Jones. Thank you so much, Lolita, for that introduction. And as you heard, I currently work for the Society for Ecological Restoration in Europe. Today, though, I want to talk to you about why ocean literacy is imperative to advancing climate solutions, especially when it comes to blue carbon, and also why you should care. Ocean literacy is defined by the UN as an understanding of our relationship with the ocean. So a person, and please can I underline that I'm saying a person and not a child, who is ocean literate, understands the fundamental concepts about how the ocean works, that they can communicate about the ocean meaningfully and make informed, responsible decisions about resources and sustainability. In terms of blue carbon, we need to understand the value of our ocean in regulating our climate and capturing carbon to promote adequate investment in it. Let's start by looking at this lovely picture. You see lots of things here: trees, rolling lowlands, jagged uplands. You can imagine the sounds, the smells, the shadow and the light. It's something that we've all seen before. If I told you that I was going to cut down all those trees and build a wind farm on those hills, you would probably feel quite outraged. Damage to that environment is visible, its effects immediate, and they are palpable. This is Athens, the infamous Acropolis, Temple of Athena, an architectural marvel built 2,457 years ago and dedicated to Athena Parthenos, the patron goddess of Athens. In 2024, 4.5 million people visited this site. That's more than half the population of London. And if I told you that I was going to raise the Acropolis to the ground, you would also be outraged. What a heartless, horrible idea, you would say. It's a piece of cultural heritage, one of the 7 wonders, a link to our past. This is the ocean. It covers 70% of the surface of the Earth. More than 80% of the ocean remains unexplored. In it, you will find trenches 7 miles deep. Waterfalls, yes, I just said waterfalls, 3,500 meters in height and 230,000 known marine species. So it's amazing, just like the forest and the Acropolis, but it's different. Because we can walk in a forest, we can cycle, we can run up and down the hills, we can experience it firsthand, hear the birds, spot a squirrel, stalk a deer. We are taught in school that these trees capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in photosynthesis and release life-giving oxygen in respiration. We can also experience the Acropolis. We read the information boards, begin to understand its history, its significance, the engineering marvel, the pivotal position it played in historical events that shape society. It's easy to touch, hard to ignore, ingrained in our psyche. But the ocean? Research suggests that up to 20% of the global population has and will never see the ocean in person. That's approximately 1.5 billion people, over 200 times the population of London, which seems to make the idea of building respect for the ocean, promoting sustainable use of its resources, finding blue carbon investment, and restoring its abounding wealth and health for the benefit of nature and people Absolutely ludicrous. How can you build a relationship with something that you have never seen? But here comes the power of ocean literacy. Even if the ocean is inaccessible to most people, it has affected each and every one of us somehow. For example, the ocean produces 50% of atmospheric oxygen and drives global systems that make the Earth habitable. Perhaps also intangible. Okay, over 90% of global trade is maritime, and we rely on maritime transport every day. Submarine cables stretching to 745,000 miles carry 99% of international data, including the internet connection you are joined with now. There are over 8,000 offshore oil and gas extraction platforms, providing around 35% of the world's oil and 30% of global natural gas production, and 80,000 individual offshore wind turbines, accounting for 1,017 gigawatts of global wind capacity and 26% of the world's renewable energy capacity. Total fish consumption in 2022 was 185 million tonnes. That's 21 kilograms per person on Earth per year. There are over 4,000 oceanographic buoys deployed to monitor various marine and atmospheric conditions, collecting data for climate research, environmental monitoring, yada, 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 but also that weather forecast that you check before your morning run. Marine organisms provide essential compounds for cancer therapy, infectious disease, pain relief. These sea squirts are a source of cytarabine, which is used to treat leukemia. One 100 ml bottle of cod liver oil requires 1.5 codfish to produce. It's estimated that tens of millions of people worldwide consume cod liver oil daily, with 2023 market size at $95.8 million US. And including warships and submarines, there are over 5,000 naval vessels in active service. Interestingly, there are also estimated to be around 3 million shipwrecks from war, accident, and storm. So, 20% of the global population might never have the pleasure of even seeing the sea, let alone able to associate to the habitats beneath it. But they have benefited from and are intrinsically affected by it. And if we can just convince them that they should know what is beneath that surface, we can make a monumental difference. Let's start with an illustration of the damage that we have caused for the benefit of people. And this slide was shown to me a few weeks ago at the Seascape Symposium at the Zoological Society of London, And this quote really hit me. It took 20 boats 7 years to dredge away the oysters. There is a fathom more water on the seabed now than when we began to dredge. There is no dredging on it now because there are no more oysters. One boat got 30,000 oysters per week. So we are happy when we restore 10,000 oysters, 30,000 oysters a week. The need for protecting, restoring, and investing in blue carbon ecosystems is urgent and cannot be ignored. Seagrasses, mangroves, salt marshes, and oyster reefs directly benefit both people and nature. Seagrass, for example, stores 35% more carbon 35% faster than tropical rainforests. Mangroves can lock carbon in soil for millennia, and salt marshes captured 10 times more carbon per hectare than temperate rainforests. So here are some ideas about how to bring the ocean to life. ClimaRest is a Horizon EU-funded Mission Ocean project that has been super inventive with its ocean literacy initiatives, which have captured the imaginations and attentions of everyone from EU commissioners to local children and their parents. This epoxy on the top left-hand corner contains pollution gathered from the seafloor just outside Longyearbyen in Svalbard. And this lady behind it is an EU commissioner watching a VR of them collecting that sewage. What she sees is pristine and beautiful, science happening at the edge of the earth. And what she's about to hold is the impact of humans on that place. They've also used Lego to bring demonstration sites to life, have created escape rooms and beautifully illustrated informational pamphlets, written a children's book, and asked people to fish plastic poop out of tanks of sea slugs, crabs, and starfish. These activities build public understanding about the importance of blue carbon by connecting emotion to information. There is a video here which I'll come back to if we have time. Team Up is an Erasmus Plus project building vocational restoration capacity in fields like agriculture, forestry, and construction. But we need the same in marine and coastal sectors. Imagine if offshore wind companies, port authorities, shipping industries had blue carbon restoration modules in their training programs. We'd have a climate literate, ocean skilled workforce ready to build back resilience. I also want to shout out to the Sea Ranger Service, who are actively upskilling young people from underserved or disadvantaged communities in seagrass restoration and environmental monitoring at sites across Europe, including the Netherlands, France, and Wales. Seagrass is a biodiversity hotspot, nursery for fish, nursery for oyster larvae, and a critical carbon sink. Supporting organisations like this is direct investment in climate resilience. Even better, hiring from these organisations is a win-win for all. You will never find a more disciplined, more eager workforce. We talk about scaling blue carbon investment or enabling restoration of damaged blue carbon capturing ecosystems, but the funding is still short-term and fragmented, be it through monitoring and enforcement of marine protected areas, active restoration measures, or a combination of both. If we want true climate impact, we need long-term funding, private sector partnerships, and mainstream awareness. Understanding this and acting on it is ocean literacy too. The bottom line is this: the ocean affects you, and you affect the ocean. Blue carbon ecosystems such as mangroves, seagrasses, salt marshes, and oyster reefs are some of our most effective natural climate solutions. Yet, because they are largely invisible, they remain undervalued and under threat. To meet the climate challenge, we must scale blue carbon solutions through collaborations with an ocean literate private sector, leading to smarter investments and a shared commitment to restoration. Thank you so much for listening to me. These are my contact details if you would like to reach out.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for this wonderful presentation. We should maybe, do we move on to Guilherme if it's now working for him?
I hope now that you can listen.
We can hear you.
Great, amazing. Because it wasn't appearing the option to turn on my microphone. Now it does. So I will share now the presentation with you. I hope not to be very boring because I am bringing a very technical object, but I will try to present it in a lighter way, let's say. So my name is Guilherme, and I'm very delighted to be here today to talk about this blue carbon from a policy perspective, because it's not really a perspective that we have every day. I will first start to apologize for my not so perfect English, or as I used to call it, my diplomatic English, because it is understood by native and non-native English speakers. So I prefer to call it a diplomatic English, but sorry in advance for any mistakes that I'm going to make, surely. But yeah, we are here today to talk about this blue carbon. What is that? This carbon dioxide, we know that is invisible. Even a colorblind person would get this right. But we are talking about ecosystems. This is what blue carbon is, like salt marshes, seagrass meadows, as Sahar mentioned, mangroves, kelp forests. So marine ecosystems that, just like rainforests, have the capacity to absorb and store massive amounts of carbon from CO2 emissions. And this distinction between carbon and CO2 will be very important in the end of my presentation. The fact is that blue carbon ecosystems are undervalued because we took them for granted. We don't see beneath that blue curtain that Sahar mentioned. It's amazing to present after Sahar because Sahar gave me the basis and then I can use a lot of reference here as well. But now we know that these ecosystems can be a great ally to mitigate global warming by balancing the quantity of human-induced CO2 in the atmosphere. But theory can only get us so far. How do we materialize this? How do we value ecosystems' ability to capture and store carbon? And policy is the answer, at least part of it. In the next 8 minutes, 8 minutes, I want to ignite your curiosity about carbon policies and the newest tools and opportunities to incorporate blue carbon in these policies. So our strategies so far in terms of carbon policy have been around doing one thing, which is price it. We are attributing a price to each ton of carbon with the intention of making polluters pay for their emissions, with the intention. But this is not really close to perfection. Even though we have some evidence that because of these policies, emissions have declined, there are unintended consequences. And in public policy, this is very important because one thing is our intention and other is its application in a reality that most of it we don't know. So it's these unintended consequences. And I'm going to show you 3 examples. This is the first one, carbon taxes. They are the most widely used policy. They were one of the first policies regarding carbon emissions, where we fix a price per ton of carbon dioxide emitted. But there are some unintended consequences, such as a regressive impact, because it tends to disproportionately affect lower income households that spend a higher share of their income on energy. So it's not targeting really the polluters, but more the consumers, and of course, affecting lower income households in a greater way. This also leads to competitiveness concerns, because this can make industries in taxed countries less competitive unless there are some adjustments in border carbon adjustments, which is we can tax a good that is coming from another country that doesn't have this carbon tax, but in the end it's going to be the consumers that pay and not the polluters. And we have heard a lot about this political resistance, because carbon taxes are often unpopular, especially if they are poorly explained or implemented. They are poorly communicated, and if they are implemented without compensation mechanisms, of course, it can lead again to a regressive impact. And of course, this is all linked. So all these unintended consequences are linked to each other. And after all, even with carbon tax, we don't know the environmental outcomes, because we don't have a cap, a ceiling for these emissions. We are just implementing an extra tax, an extra price on these products that generate carbon, but in the end it's going to be up to the consumers. So the reductions in carbon emissions are going to depend on how people respond to price changes. And if the goods are really essential goods, even if the price goes up, we have to buy them, and we will suffer the consequences in double, in the price and in the climate. Then we have the cap and trade, or just carbon markets. This is really hard to explain in a very short time. I'm going to do my best. And it's the most known and mature, market is the EU emission trading system. So the market sets a ceiling for total greenhouse gas emissions in the regions, in the region that states are allowed to emit. And each company, depending on many factors, have a determined amount of carbon credits that are allocated to that company. One carbon credit is equivalent to 1 ton of CO2 emitted. And figure that a company, this company B, for example here, can decarbonize quicker and does not use all their carbon credits. These credits can be sold to another company, the company A, that can't decarbonize as quickly. And all this without surpassing the maximum emissions cap. And this cap is going to be reduced from time to time in order to reach carbon neutrality. But just like before, this is not perfect, because firstly, there is price volatility. The permit prices can fluctuate and creates uncertainty. And Dylan probably will talk about this, because this is very important. And so when we talk about uncertainty and blue carbon investments and startups, uncertainty is a very key factor. This is also very complex. It's hard to communicate. It requires robust monitoring, reporting, enforcement, which requires a lot of transparency. And we know that we are not so good on that stage. It's also very important to see companies that may move operations to jurisdiction with no carbon constraints. This is what we call carbon leakage. Of course, in Europe, maybe we are carbon neutral, but it doesn't matter because we are importing goods from Chile, from South America, where they don't have these regulations and are polluting, and we only have one ocean as the same that we have only one atmosphere. So we will suffer the consequences as well. And a very important and one thing that most people don't know, this EU carbon market only covers for 40% of emissions. So I'm going to leave this in the air. Is this greenwashing? Is this not? So this is a very important aspect as well. So until now, I have been explaining how carbon policies work, and all of them attribute a price to a gas that we don't see. But based on what? This is really the essence of my presentation. I want all of you to think about this when you go to sleep this evening. How much is carbon worth, really? Is it 62 euros as was in Europe in April this year, or 46 during the Obama administration, or $1? It depends on how we measure it. This is very exposed to political ideologies and regimes, as we can see in the US. The differences of price between administrations, the Democrats, Obama and Biden, and the Trump administration. This is how much we value carbon and how much we think that it contributes to global warming. There is an important concept that I also want you to think about before sleeping, the social cost of carbon, which is quantifying the monetary impact, you can see it there, of an extra ton of CO2, including reduced agricultural productivity, sea level rise damages, and declines in health and labor productivity. This is not easy to measure. And more than that, it is location specific. Different communities are affected by carbon emission differently. All this to get to blue carbon and to the newest tool for decarbonization, the voluntary market. This requires, so we can apply the same logic that I just explained for the regular carbon market, but we now include projects that probably Dylan is going to talk about after, that contribute for the sequestration or reduction of carbon. For example, a project that's going to restore a seagrass meadow is expected to reduce emissions in 10 carbon credits per year. This project can sell those credits to other companies and use that profit to maintain and enlarge the conservation and restoration project. In this way, we can mobilize private capital from companies that buy these credits. However, because it's new, we don't have a consistent regulation for it to be implemented globally or even regionally. Because of that, verification standards may vary and greenwashing may occur. But as I see it, this can be really a tool to finance nature restoration and conservation. And blue carbon ecosystems are being considered a lot in this market because their rates of carbon sequestration, as Sahar mentioned, are much higher than rainforests. And as we can see by this image here. Also important to clarify that when we talk about stored carbon, we are talking about the atom C. And that is what we are going to measure on blue carbon ecosystems, soils and biomass. Then we have to translate it into carbon dioxide, which is multiplying it by 3.67. This is just a curiosity, because when we read a document that does not make this clarification, we should at least doubt it. But wrapping this up, because I think that my time is probably finished, as we saw, pricing carbon is hard and location specific and depends on the will of governors. And these are the main obstacles for its global implementation today. All these need big investments in science and data on blue carbon ecosystems. We cannot measure what we don't know. We can have reliable measurements on carbon sequestration and storage without good science. And the science that links to policy with a powerful communication, with literacy, without losing rigor. But this part, Sahar already mentioned and very well, because we need to communicate when we talk about public policy, how we measure and how we value carbon. We need to be transparent about our methodologies, because this is key for global cooperation efforts on mitigating climate change. If it's every state doing its own way, it won't work. We need to learn from each other. And to end this presentation, local communities and all stakeholders must be included from the start. This is always said when you talk about public policy, but it's very hard to do because their knowledge is incredible, of these local communities, and their participation is key for the policy effectiveness. Otherwise, it's just impactless laws and paper. And I'll just remind everyone that blue carbon can be a great tool, but this "can" is really important because it's not granted. We must act to make it happen. Laws and policies are just there. It is on us how we apply them and if we apply them, because as we see, policies are not enough, but they are a good start. They can create a great environment for impactful change. So I'll just thank you for listening to me. If you have, this was a lot of information in a short time. If you have, of course, I'm waiting for the Q&A session. You can contact me through LinkedIn. Just search my name. I will be there and we can have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Guilherme, for this very, very insightful presentation and really on time, no worry. I will now finally give the floor to Dylan to make the last presentation for us. And really, if you have any question about the presentation of Sarah, Guilherme, or to come Dylan, don't hesitate to put your question on the Q&A.
Cool. Thank you, Lalita, and thank you, Sahar and Guilherme, for those presentations. I think it's actually a really nice segue where you finished up, Guilherme, into what I'm going to speak about today, about the importance of community-led businesses in scaling some of these blue carbon solutions that we need. So again, my name is Dylan Terry. I'm the studio director at Hatch Blue. And quickly before going into this, I just want to tell you a little bit about Hatch Blue. So Hatch Blue is focused on enabling a climate smart, sustainable seafood transition. We do that through building and scaling businesses through knowledge investment and ecosystem building. We're very quickly split across 4 different business units. We have an investment team where we've invested in 70 companies, including a couple of blue carbon businesses recently, which is very exciting. We have a consulting group as well. And then I'm in the program team where we run innovation programs to find, develop, and support early stage projects in the space. We call this the Hatch Blue flywheel because we all work together to try and build and develop towards this vision that we're all so passionate about. I will just also mention as well, we are a very global company. We're headquartered in Ireland, where I'm from, but we're very global. And I think this is very important when we're talking about blue carbon, because so many of these critical ecosystems that Sahar and Guilherme talked about around mangroves and seagrass and tidal marshes, a lot of them are not in Europe, where most of us are based, and they're in parts of the world like Latin America, like Southeast Asia and Africa, and it's very important to keep that kind of global lens as we speak about blue carbon. So today I'm going to talk about a case study, and that case study is a recent program that we did that was called the Blue Carbon Plus Challenge. I'm going to start on the top, framing maybe the problem, and this will touch on some of the things that Guilherme just spoke about. Blue carbon ecosystems are very powerful carbon sinks, and Sahar set that scene quite brilliantly. However, they're also really important protectors of biodiversity, coastal resilience when it comes to flooding and other things we're struggling with right now. And then most importantly, I think, local livelihoods as it relates to fisheries and other really critical livelihoods. However, these critical ecosystems are under huge pressure, as we know. And too often what we're seeing is the protection efforts of these ecosystems really lack local ownership. So the people who are on the front lines of these ecosystems are not involved in the protection. Also, maybe some of the current economic models that we have, such as carbon markets, are really, I would say, especially in blue carbon markets, they're not working. And I think Guilherme talked about how new they are and how we need to develop global policies. But as I'll talk about with Blue Carbon Plus Challenge, we can't wait for these policies to be enacted right now. Like, we're in a climate emergency, and we need to find new ways to preserve and protect these critical blue carbon ecosystems, and that's what I'll show some examples of today. And I think related to those 2 points, these local communities have limited long-term incentives to protect these ecosystems, especially when you have to remember that a lot of these parts of the world, there's poverty and there's other challenges that these people are experiencing. So today I'm going to talk about the Blue Carbon Plus Challenge, which is one of these innovation programs that we run that was focused on finding business models that change this dynamic. So we were looking for business models that integrate both protection and production. So is the business centered around protecting while also generating a product or an income stream, and doing that together? We also wanted these business models to build local livelihoods through income without relying on carbon markets and that carbon financing. And then, you know, this also just has that effect of improving understanding through this participation. So when I started this program and started this challenge, I was asking myself the question, which many of us were, do these businesses even exist? Like, is this possible? Is this a real thing? And thankfully, yes, it does. And I'll talk about that now. So really quickly, yeah, the Blue Carbon Plus Challenge was a partnership between Hatch Blue Conservation International and the Nature Conservancy. It was a one-week program with 10 global teams. You know, they get access to one-to-one business support, assistance, and then we had some grants across 3 different categories. So we were working with community-led projects, pilot stage projects, and then also scaling projects. And it's really important that you touch on all of them. Good news is we got 220 applications for this program, which blew all of us away. No one was expecting that, and from really every corner of the world. So hopefully what I can do today is, like, oftentimes oceans and carbon, it can be quite sad and depressing, and, you know, it's like, is there any hope or positivity, or do these solutions exist? But hopefully I can create some positivity and talk about some of these solutions. So one of the companies that we had on this program was Menetsoc from Madagascar. And on the right here, you'll see Sarah Biddy and Raisa. They are sisters from Madagascar, one a marine biologist and one a doctor. They observed that in their local ecosystem, sea urchins, who have now lost their natural predators, were destroying the seagrass meadows all around the shores of Madagascar. They found a really interesting business model that can save the seagrass. So they work with their local communities to go out and harvest sea urchins from overgrazed areas, and they transform these sea urchins into valuable products. So they started off by, on the bottom right-hand corner, creating, like, I guess, decorative goods for people's houses. But after more research and her marine biology background, they realized the power of sea urchins in skincare and cosmetics. And now they're actively selling their skincare-based products using sea urchin oil in Madagascar, with plans to grow outside of Madagascar. So I think this is a really cool example. The communities in Madagascar learn about the seagrass through seeing the sea urchin products and experiencing the sea urchin products. And therefore, the business becomes a tool for education and engagement and pride for the oceans. But I think importantly, it's a business, right? And these people are generating income and building a business model, employing people in Madagascar. So, and these guys were just amazing. When they came to the workshop, they'd never presented before in English, but they were just so on it and so motivated. And it's a dream to get to work with some of these people. And so that's one example that I really love. Another example from Indonesia called Mangrove Crab Lab. Keeping on the family theme here, this is a husband and wife partnership, which is really cool. In Indonesia, as some of you might be aware, mangroves have been decimated primarily due to shrimp aquaculture. It's having a huge impact on Indonesia. This, you know, amazing husband and wife team noticed this and decided to flip the trend. They found this really amazing business model that's already profitable, where they can take degraded shrimp ponds, restore 80% of the ponds back to mangroves, and farm mud crabs in the remaining 20%. So it's like an intensive mud crab business where they can really restore most of the ecosystem while staying profitable and while selling mud crab. This is super important because Indonesia has a fifth of the world's mangroves. It's just a critical place that we find solutions to improve mangroves. There's this really amazing symbiotic relationship between mangroves and crabs, and the healthier the mangroves are, the healthier the crabs are, and this is a really nice relationship there. And speaking about ocean literacy, they're already employing 50 locals that are now getting trained in restoration and crab farming, and they're building that understanding of the importance of protecting mangroves so that they can produce crabs, so that they can sustain their communities. So it's another really cool model that we're excited about supporting. And going back to Africa, the last example I'm going to give is Mpape Cooperative in Tanzania. So they are from Pemba Island, which is a small island in Tanzania. It suffers from a lot of poverty, and because of that, the communities historically have been chopping down the mangroves to use as charcoal. It's when you understand that, and this is happening in a lot of parts of the world, these people are so poor that their last option is to cut down mangroves, to burn it, to sell charcoal, and the price at which this is being sold for is so low, and the amount of destruction it's causing, it's very sad. So what is amazing about Mpape is they've started this community-owned cooperative model in Pemba Island, where they farm sea cucumbers whilst also investing money back into mangroves and seagrass. What's cool about this model is that seagrass and sea cucumbers have a really symbiotic relationship, again, where the healthier the seagrass is, the better the sea cucumbers grow. So it's combining that protection with production again. So the community understands that if the seagrass survives, their sea cucumbers will be healthier, and then they can get a better price for the sea cucumbers in the market. And sea cucumbers are really cool because they demand quite a high value, especially in Asia. So it's a really good model. They've had some amazing impact, and they were the winners of the community-led prize. So yeah, another really cool model. I'm going to wrap up here. Key takeaways from running this program is protection needs participation. Many of these communities are key stewards of blue carbon ecosystems, and we need to support their prosperity for long-term conservation. And I think we can do that by finding these kind of business models that align conservation with income. Ocean literacy is improved through action. I think what's important to remember is a lot of these communities hold deep knowledge of their environment already. However, if we can find, support, and develop these ocean-based enterprises, I think that understanding grows even stronger, and there's more incentives there to protect these ecosystems. And lastly, these businesses exist. I said we had 220 applications for this program. There's lots of local entrepreneurs and founders solving these problems. They need investment, support, and platforms to grow, and that's what we are planning to do and are already doing, I guess. So what's next? This program, BC Plus, is looking for more businesses across seagrass, mangroves, and tidal marshes. They have $30 million to deploy. You can learn more here. So there's money available now to fund these businesses. Connect to me if you want to learn more. We're going to be running more programs like this. So yeah, if you want to reach out, dylan.terry@hatch.blue. Thank you so much, and looking forward to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Dylan, for these presentations. I saw some applause in the room. So we will now have a Q&A session. So I invite everyone in the audience to submit their question, if there is any, to our speakers in the Q&A channel, because we would love to hear your thoughts, reflections, questions on the presentations, on the subjects. And in the meantime, I have myself some interrogation after this really insightful presentation from you speakers, to give some time to the audience to reach out to the Q&A. Maybe first, like during your presentation, you make really a point about addressing the persons and not children about ocean literacy. And you also talked about your projects and everything. So in your view, how can restoration projects better engage also with adult audiences especially coastal communities, industries? And why do you think it's really important to have this shift target audience for the long-term impact of everything?
Thanks, Lolita, for that question, and thank you, Dylan and Guillaume, for those very insightful presentations. As you would have seen, I was getting very excited over here. My camera was on. Brilliant. So yeah, I emphasized at the beginning that it's people and not children, and the reason for that is because we see a lot of EU-funded projects mainly. The first thing that they go for is, I'm going to make a children's book, or I'm going to go and take this to my local school, or I'm going to bring children to the lab and show them what goes on, or whatever. And it's great to encourage that within children, and they themselves are communicators to their parents. They will go home and say, "Mom, Dad, look what I did today." But they can't do anything about it. So they will be the next generation of restoration practitioners, they'll be the next generation of investors, they'll be the next generation of everything to do with the sea. But we have to take the responsibility for doing something about it now, so that they have the opportunity to do something about it in the future. And so how can they reach out to other audiences? Well, really, you don't have to be very inventive with the way that you are communicating these ideas. An adult is going to enjoy an escape room just as much as a child is going to enjoy an escape room, or an adult will be amazed by a VR just as much as a child would be amazed by a VR. But there are loads and loads of events that happen in cities across the world, things like TEDx or Pint of Science, or just local community events. We have loads of events that happen on our local beach. Like, go out there, get a stall and get people involved, and make sure that you speak to everybody, not just the children. And that you have activities for them too. But there are also things, for example, like in the Team Up project, in terms of integrating that ocean literacy knowledge, or that knowledge, into, for example, vocational educational courses. So investing in something like that would be superb as well.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for this comprehensive answer. And talking about responsibilities of us, also really important to highlight. Really, thank you so much. I was also wondering, we don't have any Q&A questions, so I can go on with mine. I think you mentioned greenwashing during your presentation, and the risk of blue carbon markets being used as a may or may not be greenwashing. What do you think are the safeguards and verification mechanism we need to ensure transparency, integrity, and avoid greenwashing, hopefully?
Yeah, thank you, Lolita, for your question. It's one of the biggest issues, and rightfully, people, when we talk about carbon markets, as Dylan said, they are not impacting in a positive way, not ecosystems or communities that are surrounded by those ecosystems. And this is happening because these verification standards are sometimes not as transparent or not as verificative as they should be. There was a case in 2019, I think, that was exposed by The Guardian, and it was about a certain amount of carbon permits that were emitted, and it was we can say shady, I think, the way that they emitted those carbon permits. And this goes to the core of any policy, any financial market, any market whatsoever. It's about trust. To have finance mechanism, we have to have trust. And these cases undermine the capability of these policies to work. And we have, as Dylan said, it's an urgent issue. We don't have time. It's true. We have these local projects and local stories of success that need to be disseminated. And the way to avoid greenwashing is always to be transparent. And who needs to be transparent? not only companies, but also states. States need to be transparent when they are ensuring and they are implementing the methodologies. And the only way to be transparent is to have the same the same core methodologies to value, to measure the carbon. Of course, we have to make adaptations for each local scenario, but those adaptations need to be known. And me, when I'm reading a document on what's being done in the Philippines, I need to know how they did it. I do need to know the final results. I need to know if I'm an investor, I need to know how did they get there. Even though this is urgent, we need to have these methodologies and transparency straight. Otherwise, we don't have a truly global impact.
Thank you so much. I think it's really more clear now that you have highlighted the transparency as a core of what we should follow. I think we have something related in the chat about explaining why kelp forests are never considered as net carbon capturers and very rarely as targets to restore. I don't know if one of the speakers, panelists, want to address the question first, but I think, Sarah, you were like raising your hands. Maybe you had a comment.
I'll come in afterwards because it was related to Guillaume's point, so it's not related to this question.
Okay, so maybe we take this question first before you react. Yeah. Does one of you want to answer the question about kelp forests?
If Dylan doesn't want, I can.
I would say one thing before you can explain it, Guillermo, and maybe on the science side, but at Hatch Blue, we've made a lot of investments into kelp and seaweed related companies, and we are very excited by the potential of seaweed and kelp and its impact that it can have. My understanding of why it isn't mentioned like mangroves and seagrass and tidal marsh is the science isn't as robust right now in terms of the carbon potential of kelp. That's my understanding, but maybe Guillaume can speak on that.
Yes, thank you, Isabel, for your question, because it's, I think I mentioned it in my presentation. At least I had an image of a kelp forest in my presentation, because it's one of the ecosystems that is not so frequently mentioned. And for example, in my country, Portugal, we have kelp forests, and probably I would risk a number of 90% of Portuguese people don't know, even more than 90% of Portuguese people don't know that we have kelp forests just in our coast. And they are just not only carbon capturers, but they are also very important on coastal resilience and to prevent coastal erosion, and also mangroves as well. And there are a lot of studies about that. I think that it's a matter of communication. I think that once kelp forests that we associate to sea otters, those very incredibly cute animals, if we associate them to these new business models that Dylan was just mentioning, I also know a lot of them that involve kelp forest, even to include kelp in the feeding of cows in order for the cows to produce less methane. So it's really, there are a lot of possibilities with kelp forests. We also need to be careful with them and while we're storing them, because they can be invasive in some parts of the world if this is not well taken care of. But this is what I know.
Thank you so much. Sarah, did you have like a comment to do?
Yeah, I just wanted to continue with that idea of communication, really, and communicating with policymakers and communicating with people who are kind of maybe us as researchers or as scientists who are carrying out these actions or helping with these initiatives aren't confident with doing. I come across with a lot of researchers who are like, I don't know how to speak to a policymaker, or I don't know how to speak to an investor, or I don't know how to speak to a funding body. And that sort of thing is something that we all have to collaborate on to help each other really understand and develop those skills in communicating the kind of, I don't want to say the right thing, but communicating in a way that is suitable for that audience. So for example, a policymaker is going to want to know certain things. They have no time. They want to know it very, very briefly. And a business person wants to know how it's going to benefit them and how it's going to give them money in the future, give them back money in the future. But then a researcher spends all their time trying to get published. So because those credits are really important for them. So it's kind of, we have to bring their views towards communicating with a different audience. And these kind of tools and these case studies and these amazing people who are speaking out, I think, are super important in that story. But yeah, we just have to be inventive a little bit, I think, and kind of promote it within research. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think with your comments, you kind of address one of the questions we had about the way also to educate not just communities, but also the one in powers, like how to address policymakers and target them also strategically and etc. I think your comments was related to that, so maybe we have time for one last questions before we wrap up. We have one question about investing in vocational educational courses. And yeah, the person is asking if you can explain what do you mean about that when you were mentioning that. You can give some details.
So a vet school or a vocational educational training school is somewhere where a student can go where they don't, or they do practical or vocational courses. So for example, learning how to become a forester or a farmer or a builder or a, let me see, someone who works in a port or whatever, but they need to develop some skills before they can go and do that job. And so that's a vocational educational training centre. In the UK, I don't know whether this makes sense to anybody else. In the UK, we have different types of schools. We have colleges, which usually do these kind of vet courses, and we have secondary schools and sixth forms, which do A levels. So you don't really do an exam, you do these you develop these practical skills. And incorporating ocean literacy or restoration or these blue carbon finance ideas into that training is super exciting, and a super exciting way to upskill young people and workers about ocean literacy, but also restoration. So for example, there's a company in Norway called Heide, who are a construction company, and in their training, so when you join the company as a vocational student, you have to do a number of courses, just like we have to do courses in IT and data management and, you know, safety, fire safety and whatever. It's one of those courses that is introduced as restoration, ecosystem restoration. But it would be amazing if we could have a fleet of resources which were available for marine as well.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for the details and the precision about vocational trainings. Super interesting. I think we had a last question. We will not have time to answer to Guillaume about how CO2 money is calculated. But I think your email address and your contacts was in your presentation, and yeah, maybe we can answer these questions later on. So I'm sorry, I saw that there was a question in the group chat, but we are running out of time, so we'll need to wrap up the session. But thank you so much, the audience, for your involvement and engagement about these sessions. Feel free to reach out to the speakers to ask more details and questions until they are really welcome to answer more about the subject. Oh, sorry. So thank you so much, Dylan, Guillermo, Sarah, for your really good and really insightful presentation, and for joining us today, and for the audience to engage about this really, really important subject. We will have this webinar will be available on EurOcean's YouTube channel. If you want to, feel free to share it around you if you think it's interesting to your networks and everything. And the next EurOcean webinar will take place in July. So stay tuned on the website and social media channels, LinkedIn, etc., to follow up and have more details to join us for the next one. And until then, thank you so much to have been there and keep spreading the word about ocean literacy and keep engaged. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much to our speakers. And thank you so much to Ruth, Mamina, and Sarah for organizing everything today.
And thank you so much to Lolita, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Lolita.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you a lot.
Bye.